Welcome back to our podcast. I'm your host, Sandy Casella from Casella Homes Real Estate. And today we're going to dive into a crucial topic that all home buyers always ask questions about, and this is home inspections. So joining me today is Dean McNeil from A Buyer's Choice Home Inspections. He is a seasoned home inspector expert with over 15 years of experience in the field. And Dean has done a lot of the home inspections for our team, so I'm very familiar with his work. And I know with our clients, they're always very comfortable with the way you explain things and the way that you um, bring things to light. And we'll do a bit of a deeper dive into home inspections and what's important and some questions that I have that I feel like buyers always ask. And then we'll go from there. So thanks a lot, Dean, for joining me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on here. This is great.
Yeah. Did you want to introduce yourself a little bit? I know I gave a bit of an intro, but if you want to give some information about yourself, that would be great.
Sure. Well, yeah, the a buyer's choice home inspections. I don't know if you're aware, it's a franchise company. So essentially, most of us make an investment and buy a territory, and we're franchise owners. There are sub franchisees, but so I'm a franchise owner and operator. So it's my own business, but we have brand guidelines that we adhere to and things like that, which makes us look professional when we show up for, which I think realtors appreciate. Um, One thing I think I'd like all the realtors listening to know, is that this company was actually started by a realtor, and it was in Nova Scotia. And I think, basically, he was tired of home inspectors showing up in dirty old jeans and talking crassly and being an alarmist and basically ruining deals. And I think he was like, there's got to be a better way than this. I think we can have a more polished, professional way. Um, so we're professionally branded, and I think all of us have kind of customer service skills that it has to be that on top of the technical skills. The other important thing that a lot of people don't know, a lot of realtors don't know, there are no regulations in Ontario requiring a home inspector to be trained in any way or certified in any way. It's actually kind of shocking. The only two provinces that do are BC and Alberta. Um, and that's just really surprising because I know you as a realtor, there's so many rules and regulations that you have to adhere to. It must be almost frightening where there's no regulations for us. But what we at a buyer's choice do, we kind of we pretend that there are regulations. And so the company, before you can go out and do anything, we are trained to almost double the standard that would be required and that is required, like in the US or other areas, even before we were allowed to do an inspection for somebody. So we're well trained. We take the Carson Dunlop course. We have to pass that before we do anything. We have to do a number of inspections with a master inspector. So just so you know, this is what a buyer's choice is about. And this is all the realtors that I work with are finding that, okay, these guys really know what they're talking about. And they're good with people, and they're not coming in and being an alarmist about everything. And I think that's a really important differentiator. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And that is, I knew home inspectors weren't regulated, and you're right. I think that's it is a little bit shocking to me because
It's
I think
amazing.
the public needs to understand that, right? That when you hire a home inspector, you need to know what you're getting because really anybody could be a home inspector. Like if you think about it, I, I've I've probably sat through, I don't know, I've sat through hundreds and hundreds of home inspections. I probably could do a home inspection. Now let me quantify that. I could do a home inspection because I know what they touch on, but could I do one effectively? No, because I don't know some of the things to look out for. So that is a
Right.
very good point. So do you think that like what is it that sets a buyer's choice apart from other inspections? Is it mostly the requirements that the company sets on yourselves to make sure that what you're doing is serving the public?
Well, it's two things, and I think both are equally important. The first is the technical knowledge. Like we are simply not allowed to get out there, until we are fully trained and we know what we're talking about. And then, of course, experience counts, right? I mean, you can go to a classroom forever, but you're still not going to get the knowledge that you get when you're out there and you're actually doing. That's the same with anything, really. But to your point, I mean, you feeling like you've been through a number of inspections, you could build a website tonight and go out and start inspecting tomorrow. I don't know if you get insurance, but it's that is the situation. The second thing that I think that is a differentiator, they made it very clear to me when I had to be interviewed, even though I was, purchasing something, I had to be interviewed to make sure I was the type of person that is right for a buyer's choice. And what that means is kind of a people person, a person who at least has a good knowledge of and understanding of customer service and relationship management, those kinds of things. So I think those are really, really important because you could have the most technical person in the world, and if they get on site and they don't know how to speak to realtors or home buyers or sellers, if it's a pre-listing inspection, um, they could really shake things up. I mean, if you look at something and say, whoa, that doesn't look good. I mean, that's not the way that you go about things, right? I mean, my job is to be there to observe and report what I see. Um, s- every home has a list of issues. It's just a fact. You're not going to find the perfect home, even new builds. It's just a question of how long is that list of issues and how expensive are some of those items. Still, it's not for me to judge, whether this home is pass or fail. We don't really do that. I've been in some homes and thought, holy mackerel, I don't know why you're even thinking of this, but they were going to gut the whole thing and flip it and turn it over and rent it. And I was like, oh, well, that makes perfect sense, right? Um, and different people have different expectations. Some people are going out to buy a Volkswagen and some are going out to buy a Lexus. It's not for me. It's for me to find out what either safety issues are in the house or structural issues or, anything potentially damaging, dangerous, expensive, all those kinds of things, so that they're fully informed when they're going to make a very, very large purchase.
Yeah, I like what you said there because that was going to be one of my things that I was bringing up is a lot of people will say, "Did it pass a home inspection?" or
Yeah,
"Didn't pass." So what I try to explain to people is there is no pass. This isn't a pass or fail.
right.
This is a um, almost like an investigation thing, and it also sets the client up to know what's going to need to be done and how to maintain a house. Let's face it, if you're a home time first time home buyer, you've never had to maintain a house. So I think home inspections are really good for that in terms of what will I have to do going forward, to
Yeah.
make sure that the house stays in good shape. And I know you do a good job of that. So
Thank
um,
you.
yeah, and so you've addressed that basically that there is no pass or fail. It's what am I looking for? Someone who's looking for a home that they're not going to have to do work to for 15 years.
Yeah.
They need, there's certain things they want to know. Is this furnace going to last? Is the roof going to last? All that stuff. And like you said, there's other people who go in, they realize that it's a gut job. They're going to have to do work. And some people are looking for that. That's okay. But is it way out of the scope of what I can do? So,
Of course,
so
yeah.
that's kind of what I think what buyers need to understand. It's not a pass or fail.
It's not. I often get that question. Does this house pass? And I just tell them that this is not a pass or fail. This is me assessing the situation and letting you know so you have full knowledge of what you're going into. Another question I get a lot is, would you buy this house? Uh, if I would, I'm happy to say yes. If not, then I very diplomatically answer because
Mhm.
that again, it goes back to what are you looking for? Are you looking for a house that is at a very low price because it's in bad shape? You want to fix it up so it's in good shape and sell it. That I might not buy that house because that's not what I'm into. I'm not into flipping
Mhm.
houses. That doesn't mean that you're not. So it's not really for me to judge anything like that. But this actually raises a really good point about one of the things that we try to do is to stay in our lane in a way. Um, Very early on, I think it was within my first couple of months, I said something. It was a buying inspection, and the the woman who's buying the house, she said, "Well, do you think that's an issue?" And I said, "Well, it is. It's a safety issue for sure." And I said, so that's the kind of thing that you probably go back to the seller and maybe see if there's some kind of negotiation room. I kind of got a strip torn off me by the realtor at that time, because and I understand it. Like at first I was a little shocked because I actually thought I was adding value. But I now completely understand it's not for me to talk about what can be negotiated and not negotiated. I don't do that. I stay in my lane.
Right.
Because what she said to me, and I hadn't thought of it before, but I was also pretty new. Um, she said, we got this house, or we're getting this house for a very, very good price. And there is no more room for negotiation. And I had already let the client know that. And now you've opened the door and she's got an expectation. Well, the home inspector said that we could
Mhm.
negotiate.
Yes.
Okay, I understand completely why that was not a good thing. So
Yeah.
it's one of those things, I was talking about like experience, right? You go out and you can have all the training in the world, but when it comes right down to it, you might even think you're being helpful. Like I thought I was being helpful. And I thought, okay, lesson learned. Do not do that again. I mean, I'm happy to give people my absolute honest observations, but whether that observation is a terrible thing, that's not for me to decide. And whether it can be negotiated, that's not for me to decide. And another question I get a lot is, well, how much do you think that'll cost to fix? That's a tough one. I don't, we try not to give that kind of pricing, because it kind of opens us up to potential troubles. Sometimes if I have a really solid idea, I can say, well, it might be within this range just based on my experience, but I always have this disclaimer, don't
Mhm.
quote me on that. Go out, talk to some companies, get 3 quotes and see what you're dealing with. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And when you first said that, I was like, that doesn't make sense. But it does. Sorry about the not saying you can go back and negotiate, because that is a
right.
good point. And we just ran into this with a house that we sold, and they bargained really, really hard on the price.
Okay.
And we did not, and it was the house is a gut job, complete gut job. And when they decided to take it, I said to the realtor, they're going to accept this and you're welcome to do the home inspection. However, we will not renegotiate the price, period.
Right.
At this
Yeah.
price, if they find stuff in the home inspection that they're not okay with, then they need to walk away and we will put it back on the market. And it
Yeah.
became a big issue with this realtor, a very big issue. And she basically like tore a strip off me afterwards, saying, well, why would you let us do a home inspection? And I wasted my time. And I said, listen, if you think you wasted your time because you did a home inspection and you got people in there to get you a price on what it would cost to fix, then you're in the wrong business, because that's your job. This guy is now going into the property with his eyes wide open, knowing what's
Right.
cost him. You haven't wasted any time. But I made it very clear from the get-go, at the price you paid, there was no room for renegotiation. But I
Mm.
think this is an important point that people don't understand, is that when we talk about these things and say things like, you don't want a home inspector who's going to kill the deal. We don't mean, because some people may listen to that and think we want a home inspector to go in there and not point out problems. That's not what we're looking for. I'll give you an
Right.
example. And you
100%.
said about saying certain things. I'll never forget this. We had a home inspection on the property a few years ago, and they got their own home inspector, which always makes me nervous, because I don't, sometimes it's Uncle Phil, sometimes it's the neighbor, so like it could be anybody. It's not a qualified home inspector.
Right.
Anyway, this guy was supposedly, and he came in, and I'll never forget, I couldn't believe it. He got the ladder out, went up in the attic, looked up in the attic and went, "Oh my God, there's vermiculite in here." And that was the end of it. And I could not get the buyers to understand that we have to get it tested. Just because
Yeah.
there's a certain type of insulation, it doesn't mean it's harmful. We need to get it tested. Anyway,
Yes.
we eventually did for asbestos. So no, he said, no, he didn't say vermiculite. He said, "Oh my God, there's asbestos in here." And like,
Oh,
that's
boy.
literally how he said it. And he yelled it out. I was like,
Yeah, that's not
anyway,
good.
we finally got them to understand that because there's vermiculite, it doesn't mean there's asbestos. Let's get the seller to get it tested. And they did, and there wasn't asbestos. But that's a perfect example of killing a deal where it didn't need to be killed. There's a certain way. I don't want any home inspector to go in, whether I'm acting for the seller or the buyer, and not identify issues, because that opens everybody up to problems. It opens me up to problems. It opens the seller, everybody up to problems. I
Yep.
do want them, however, to educate people about these things. Like when you say about a safety issue, sometimes a safety issue, it could be a bylaw thing that when this house was built, this was the bylaw. And
Mhm.
now the bylaw has changed. And so when we say things like this is a safety issue, or this is, this is not up to code, we have to understand that up to code could have possibly changed 3 months ago. So
Yes.
it's not, when I say, we don't want inspectors who are going to kill the deal, we don't want inspectors to lie, but we also expect
Right.
inspectors to be like yourself, to be able to convey to a buyer, this is the reality here, right? Like I think every single home inspection I've ever attended, they always say the grading needs to go up on the side. And yes, and that's right, because you want the water. I have yet to come across a house where the grading, if the house is older, the grading goes up. And so
Yeah.
sometimes buyers get scared, but it's like, this is a very common issue. This is a very common thing. And it's not, we're not going to go and get the seller we're not renegotiating the seller to waterproof the house or to redo all the grading. Just be aware of it. So
Yeah.
that's important, I think. So thanks for bringing
Yeah.
that up. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, my pleasure. And sometimes buyers, I find, will they come into the inspection fixated on one thing, and they're terrified of that one thing.
Mhm.
Um, and like, let's say mold in the attic. Like they're just, you can just see in their face, like if there's mold in the attic, they're walking away. So I mean, I think part of my job is to educate people that, oh yes, okay, there might be some mold in the attic, but it's not the end of the world. Maybe there's just a little bit, and it just needs to be remediated. And there's more than one way and more than one price point for remediating mold. And secondly, you want to know that, because if the exhaust vent has fallen off out of the hole that goes through the roof, and it's laying there in the attic, sending moist air in there, you need to know that, because you can go up and clean the mold, but you're just putting a band-aid on the problem if you don't also fix the actual problem. Um, and I think people just have different ideas of what, you know, it's fear of the unknown, right? You don't know what's behind your wall. And I can't go in and I can't cut a chunk out of the wall, but I can generally tell from the clues that I see, and the tools that I have, thermal imaging camera, moisture meter, stains. You almost do, as you said earlier, become a little bit of a detective, because it's like, okay, well, that stain, there's a stain there by the water heater, and yet the water heater looks perfect. Oh, and the stain runs over to the furnace. Okay, what's going on in the furnace? So then you find out there's just a condensate leak, and it's something small and can be fixed, by an HVAC guy in 15 minutes. So it really is important to make sure that people understand the context of what the actual problems are and whether they're huge problems. There are some, there's not too many problems that are insurmountable. Um, so yeah.
What tools do you use? So you touched on some of the tools that you use. What are some of the tools or some of the methods that you would use on a regular basis to do an inspection?
First thing I do is I send a drone up to have a look at the roof. It's much safer for us, especially in the winter when there's ice and snow up there, rather than climbing on the roof. Um, Sometimes when I go there and there's another contractor, they're like, "Oh, what? You're not going up on the—" No, I'm not actually, because A, this is a lot faster. B, I can zoom right in. I've got 4K video on my drone. Like I can get right in there. I've even gotten in for commercial inspections and been able to take a picture of a data plate on an air conditioner so that I could read the serial number, the model number, all that stuff. So it's very effective, and shaves some time off the inspection. And everybody seems to love the drone. As it like if people get excited about drones, I guess.
Yeah.
But besides that, I mean, I'd say the moisture meter, the thermal imaging camera are probably two of the more important ones, because when it comes to moisture, whether it's in the basement, if I'm doing a inspecting a finished basement and it's all drywall, well, I can't see if there's a leak in the foundation, but what I can see, if I use a thermal imaging camera, if I see some kind of very strange dark blob, dark meaning cool, which can mean moist. um, if it's a weird shape, it's possible that there's moisture there. And then I can double check in that specific spot with a moisture meter. Happened 2 days ago, actually, in a house I inspected. There was actually came across a spot, checked it with a moisture meter, it was 70% moisture. So no, I can't cut the drywall out, but I can tell them quite clearly that there's something going on. I couldn't tell, and there's no way for me to tell from what I had, whether it's, a plumbing pipe leak or whether it's the foundation leaking. But what I can tell them is that the drywall is very moist and there's a damp spot there. So we do what we can with the tools that we have, but they're very effective. That and trusting your eyes and your nose.
Yeah, and I think that you're right about the puzzle pieces and the clues, and then the job is, if you've identified that there's moisture behind there, then what do we do next? That's our opportunity to take a next step and figure out what is the issue, right? You're not
Yes.
necessarily going to figure that out. The same with the attic. If there's mold in the attic, then what do we do next? Now we have someone else go in and check it, see how much it would cost to fix or whatever. So
Yes.
that's the home inspection is, I would say you know, it's the first look at everything, right? It's the first look where, as we go in as realtors, I mean, I have some experience. I've flipped houses for years and I've owned a lot of houses and stuff. So I have some experience, but I would never profess to I always tell people, if you have the opportunity to do the home inspection, do it.
Yeah.
Whatever you're paying for that home inspection to give you that peace of mind that you can sleep at night and you're not likely to have something come up later and bite you in the butt. Do it. It's absolutely worth it. It's a very, very small fraction of what you're paying for a house, right? If you're paying a million
Yeah.
and a half, $2 million for a house and you're paying, 750, 800, whatever it is for a home inspection, it's a very small price to pay to find something that could be an issue that you didn't know about. So
Yes. Yeah.
it's really important. Yeah.
Yeah. That could
What
be
type?
an
Yeah,
expensive issue, or it could be a safety issue where
right.
maybe your kids are going to get hurt, or something, right? You might get electrocuted. Yet you don't want those things. You want to be fully informed, as you said. Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. I know you touched on it a bit, but can you go over a little bit about what a home inspector can do and what they can't do? Now, I know you mentioned about, you can't go ripping drywall off, you can't go moving things around, but what are the things that you can and can't do?
It says right in the wording of the contracts that we have, and et cetera, that it is a non-invasive home inspection. So yes, I will look behind things, absolutely. If something's fairly light, sometimes I'll move it. But I mean, if there's a whole storage room full of stuff, like, I'm sorry, I'll see what I can
Yeah.
see. But we've got, there's always a kind of a maximum amount of time that we have in the house to do the home inspection, and I need to sort of go from roof to foundation and let them know anything that I find, kind of thing. So there are limitations. Sometimes people try to hide things, and like the seller as well. Is it on purpose or not? Sometimes I think it is, and sometimes I think it isn't. Um, Definitely, I have pulled up mats and found interesting, holes in the floor that I wouldn't have seen if I hadn't pulled up the mat. So I mean, but if you go in, like, you just kind of, I'm always observing, right? So I go, if I'm gonna check a sink, run the water, open up the cupboard. It's fairly straightforward. Is there water dripping from the plumbing or not? No, there isn't. Okay, but they've got a bowl underneath the trap. Okay, why is there a bowl underneath the trap? Or why is there a cloth sitting there? Or there's a stain directly underneath the trap. Okay, so I want people to be informed, as again, without scaring them, but I just want them to know. So I'll mention it in the report. I didn't see an active leak, but there's a stain under the trap. I recommend monitoring it. And if you see any signs of a leak, call a professional. So those kinds of things, so that they're completely informed. Um, I don't know if that completely answers your question, but yeah,
Yeah, I
it's
think so. Yeah. Yeah.
non-invasive inspection. Yeah.
Yeah, when I say not moving things, I mean, obviously you're going to move, you're going to look behind things, but what I mean is some people expect a home inspector to go in and, you know, I don't know, rip up carpets and stuff, which you can't do. You can't do that, right?
No, I
So
don't have, and frankly, I mean, they haven't bought the home yet, really.
exactly.
It's conditional.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you have bought the home and it's now yours and you want me to, well, even then, I don't think I have time to cut your drywall open, but I might do a little bit more. I might be a little more invasive if it's your house and you ask me to. But for the most part, no, we cannot go ripping things apart or undoing things. And I like to leave things as I found them. I mean, it's kind of just of how was raised anyway.
Uh,
But that's the way that I like to leave things when I leave an inspection.
yeah, and that's important because the person who owns the house still owns the house.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
They
And
own it until
and they're
closing
allowing us in the
happens.
house.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think for potential home buyers? Like, what would be some red flags regarding the condition of a home, or something, for instance, like things that you maybe see quite often that home buyers should look out for?
It's a difficult one because some things take a trained eye. So I could say, foundation cracks, but there's a huge disclaimer on that one when I say that because um, is there parging over the foundation? Because parging in Canada, we have a freeze thaw cycle every year, and it's not going to be more than 2 or 3 years, and that parging is going to start to crack, and maybe pieces are breaking away. That's not the foundation itself. That's just an extra layer of waterproofing. It would be good if they fix it. Sure.
Yeah,
It's not the end of the world. The house is not falling apart. Um, and if I see cracks in the foundation itself, my first thought is more about, are there indications that there's structural movement? That would be the big one. Is the house structurally sound? Are the bones good, as they say, right?
mhm,
Or or am I seeing signs that there's shifting? And I have seen it. And sometimes that's because the soil conditions have changed beneath the house or one side of the house. Sometimes because, there's maybe a karst nearby or there's water under the ground that is changing things. Maybe it wasn't engineered right in the first place. It's hard to say. But all cracks can let water through. Somebody told me recently that they had on a previous home they bought. The inspector said, "Yeah, if the crack isn't wider than a dime, water can't get in." Well, I kind of like looked at her and I said, "I don't know if that's true." She said, "Of
yeah,
course it's
yeah,
not true." I'm like, "Okay, good. I'm glad you said that because it absolutely is not true. Like
yeah,
water is insidious; it'll get in
yeah,
anywhere." And frankly, concrete and bricks and those kind of materials, cinder blocks, they're all porous. You let decades and decades and decades go by, you might see a little bit of water seepage, a little bit of efflorescence. And if you're going to buy a house that was built in 1961, if you're going to walk away because there might be a little bit of efflorescence on a foundation wall, then I think you're not looking at it correctly. If I see signs that there's water, like, reaching down to the floor and I see stains running to the drain, I'm like, okay, you have some water issues here. So it really depends on the context, especially people buying century homes. I don't think your basement's going to be like bone dry. That's just not a thing. It could be an old stone foundation that has been kept well, but
yeah,
still, those things were built by probably whoever owned the home. They probably built it themselves with their buddies and back in the day, and there's no way it's going to be completely waterproof 130 years later. So it's a question of what you're looking for. If you're looking for a century home, it's what is the degree that we're talking about? What's the degree of moisture, and what's my degree of tolerance as a buyer? Do I accept that there's going to be some moisture in the basement? We run a dehumidifier. If there's larger problems, we fix them. We maintain the foundation, or is that just too much for me? And if that's too much, then that's not the house for you.
yeah. I agree. I'm laughing because I live in a house that's a century home, so it's about 120 years old, and
Yeah.
my basement is not dry. Let me tell you. So it's
Yeah.
one of those old stone foundations, like you're saying. It's all made of stone, and there's an actual almost a river in there. We have a lot of water in the thaw. So,
Sometimes a
however,
dirt floor. I mean, yeah.
I don't have a dirt floor, but I'm never, I don't have the expectation that I'm going to finish this basement. Like, it's just not,
Right.
it's a cellar, what people would call a cellar. So you're right.
Yeah.
It's all, you have to know what your level of comfort is. I think that's what it comes down to. What's your
Yeah.
comfort level on this? How much how much do you want to take care of? And sometimes with condos, like, that's why people buy condos. Like, sometimes people say to me, "I don't understand why anyone would buy a condo." Well, you know what? It's because buying a condo is a lifestyle, and people know I can lock my door, I can leave, I don't have to worry about certain things, and
Right.
that's why people buy condos. Which then I guess leads to the question about doing home inspections there, and I think they should be done. I think a home inspection should be done on any home if you have the opportunity to do it, because it's going to it's sometimes people will say, well, I've taken buyers through condos, and the agent says, well, why would you do a home inspection? It's a condo. Well, there's a lot of things that could go wrong in a condo that you're still responsible for and that you need to know about. So maybe touch on that a little bit about why it's important to do them, even if it's a condo building.
Absolutely, I get that question a lot, and I've heard of, I've heard some people say, "Well, it's a condo. Does it really need, you know?" But yeah, I have found, by noticing stains on the ceiling and then testing it, I have found plumbing leaks from the condo above. Um, Depending on the condo, like they all seem to have a different situation as to whether they have their own water heater or it's in the building or whether they have their own furnace or it's, an air handler. Um, but if it's equipment that is within their apartment and they own and they're responsible for, it's probably good for them to know that this thing is 20 years old and is probably in its golden years. And hasn't been maintained. Sometimes I pull out the filter and it's funny because in a house, it's like people are more aware they've got to change the furnace filter now and then. Condo apartment, sometimes I pull these things out. I swear that thing hasn't been looked at in 20 years. Like
Oh,
the amount of
really?
dust, I'm surprised it hasn't even like shut down the equipment. So I mean, they need to know that A, there hasn't been a lot of maintenance done. B, this unit is older. So there are things to look at. Sometimes I open up the electrical panel in an apartment and it's mostly aluminum wiring. Sometimes I open up the and look at the plumbing underneath and it's Kitech, which I don't know if ever you probably know, but not everybody knows, I guess. But Kitech is the kind that it basically fails at the joints. There was a huge like class action lawsuit around Kitech. And there have been like apartment buildings that have had to spend millions of dollars to take the Kitech out and put, other PEX lines in or whatever. So yeah, definitely, there's lots of things that I can find in a condo apartment, and it's a bit eye-opening for people when they realize. The other thing too, like we at a buyer's choice, it's not a standard part of a home inspection to test appliances. Um, and we say that right in there so that it's clear, but we do it as a courtesy. So I always test all the kitchen appliances. I always test the washer and dryer. Um, if anything, just to make sure, you turn the washing machine on, is there water running across the floor? That would be a good thing for the buyer to know. Um, is the oven not working? That's important. Yeah, things like that. Is the exhaust fan in the kitchen blowing right back into the kitchen? They should probably know that. So at least they have their eyes open. They can decide if they want to fix it or never fix it, if they care or not. But those observations are important to people.
Yeah. That's true. I want to get back to the Kitech in a second, but you're right about that. And I think earlier you said about sometimes sellers try to hide things and sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
And I agree. Sometimes they do try to hide things. However, some things are sellers, like I know myself, you get used to things the way they are in your house sometimes and you just live with it. You know what? That element on the stove over here doesn't work. Well, I don't care. I never use it anyway. And so a buyer might come in and be like, oh, it doesn't work. Like they need to replace it. Well, the seller's like, it's not a big deal to me. So I don't replace it. And that kind of stuff happens. With
Yeah.
the tech, I think it's really important to understand, like you said, in a condo, because in a condo, you are responsible for the plumbing in your unit in most cases. So yes, that tech maybe is attached to the tech in the building, and you can't do anything about that, but you are responsible for your own unit. You are
Yeah.
responsible for the wiring in your unit, which then leads to the outside. So the condo corp is responsible for anything behind the walls, but you're responsible for the things in your unit. And so that brings up a good point about, if you were to see high tech in there, because then that typically will lead to the question of, okay, well, when is the building replacing this? Because it has to be replaced. It's not a matter of if, it has to be replaced.
Yes.
So is there enough money in the reserve fund to replace it? And is there a plan already to replace it? Because they may already have a plan to replace that. and it may
Yeah.
already be accounted for, but we need to know that. So everything kind of leads to another question. It's all a puzzle. They all lead to more questions. So then the
Absolutely.
question could be, okay, we realize there's high tech in here. We realize the building is going to have to remediate. And what's the plan? Okay, well, then maybe we find out, oh, well, there's a big special assessment coming up that everybody's going to have to pay for. So this is why all of this is important to find out. And that's the job of professionals like you and I, is to make sure that we are protecting our client, because I see a lot of clients go in and they get razzle dazzled by the staging or the way it looks, and they don't always understand that when you buy this, all of the decorations are not here.
Yeah.
It's like you have to be able to look past that. And you have to know what is a big issue and what is not a big issue. And what, like you said, what is an issue that you're willing to deal with, and something that may not phase me would maybe be a big red flag for somebody else. They may not want to buy that house. And that's all we're trying to do here, I think, both of us, is
Yeah.
educate the buyer and the seller to the best of our ability so they can make a good educated decision on what to do next. Right?
Yeah.
So for instance, you have a if I have a house listed and they do a home inspection and the deal falls apart because of the home inspection, well, now the seller knows that. And now the seller has to address it in one way or another. And some of these things, are very important. If there's a lot of mold in the attic, if there's issues, then the seller, you can't now resell that house fully knowing that and not answer that question. It has to be disclosed at that point. So there's a lot of things that come up. And it's good for sellers to know, because the last thing you want is to sell a house, pressure somebody to not do a home inspection, and then something goes wrong and you get sued. And that's a huge red flag. Like as soon as an agent says, will they take the home inspection out? It's a red flag. Like, why, let the
Why?
buyer do the home inspection. Let them
Yeah.
do their own due diligence and figure things out on their own. So
Yeah.
I think it's really it's important that people go in educated about what they're getting themselves into.
Yeah, and just, hopefully everybody's operating in good faith, but as you know, there are always some people who are not operating in good faith, and that's just life. But I did like the way that you put it there when you said that's our job as professionals. Because I also feel I feel this way, and I know like a buyer's choice in general feels this way, that I consider the realtors I work with my realtor partners. I consider it a partnership. Like what you do and what I do should fit together and not conflict, but actually work together. I think that, some people probably think it would be better for me if the house inspection like if the deal fell through because of the house inspection, and then I got another house inspection out of this buyer.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, sure, for one time, but is that worth it? I would much rather, first of all, I just like people, and if people are looking to buy their first home and I'd much rather to give them a good report than to have to break bad news, as diplomatically as I might do it, but still, um, I'd much rather the deal goes through and we're all happy. We move on to the next one, right? But I think that even realtors, like I do go in sometimes to brokerages and give presentations on for the realtors what to watch for when you do a walkthrough, like your initial walkthrough with the client or without the client, because there's probably some bigger items that you can kind of look for. I think it's much better if you go down in two homes and you see that one, based on what I have shared with that presentation or something, you can see that there's a huge horizontal crack, and the foundation is bowing in, the foundation is clearly failing. So steer your buyer away from that one and let's go to the one where the foundation's not failing, and then we'll do the inspection on that one. Um, Without that, if you just, well, they like this one, well, that's great, but if the foundation's failing, that's really not going to help them too much, right? So I really think that the partnership of what we do is really, really important. And I go in there not seeing myself as, Mr. Expert to just tell everybody everything. I see it as a partnership with the realtor, an obligation of duty to the buyer to give them the best information that I can give them, and try not to miss anything, and hopefully it all goes through.
I agree, because I feel like it is a big reflection on each other. Like I feel like if I'm referring somebody, then I want to know how they work. I want to know what their standards are. I think
Yes.
our team aligns. I mean, you work a lot more with Artigas than you do with me, although we've done a couple together. But
Yeah,
we want to make sure that it aligns because it's like you said that well, I'd rather get 2 home inspections. Well, to me that's a really short-sighted way to think, and it's also a really it's
pretty
going
short
to,
sighted.
like, you're not going to be in this business very long. There's a reason I've been in business for 35 years, and people call me 20 years later to when their kids are buying or to sell their house, and that's because I'm always looking at the long-term gain here. So yes, maybe they don't buy this house and you do another home inspection, but I know for a fact that if you do a good job on that home inspection, you're going to get referrals and we're going to keep sending you business, because if we feel like you're, doing something like that on a deal, or you're hiding things to get a deal to go through, then we're not sending you any more business, plain and simple. So it's not, it's a long-term gain. And I think I had this conversation on our last podcast with the lawyer about experience, and especially now that the market has changed, because there are a lot of agents, and I'm just going to be really blunt about this. There's more than 50% of realtors that are licensed with the Toronto Real Estate Board that have not sold a house this year. And there's another probably 25% that have sold less than 3. So now you have to think about that. If you're dealing with someone who doesn't have the experience and they really need that money, then they're going to do everything they can to put this deal together. I can't operate like that because I couldn't sleep at night if I operated like that. So
Same.
our job, like I said earlier, let's educate the public. And that's why we're doing this podcast. Educate, let people make the best decision that they can with the proper knowledge that they have from the best experts, and everything else will take care of itself. So
Yeah.
that's super, super important to me that we're aligned on that side, because
Agree.
I bought my first house at 22, and it was a disaster experience. We had nobody who helped us
I'm
with the
sorry to hear that.
well, you know what? It is what it is. We
Yeah.
bought our first house at 22. We went in, actually, it's a funny story. So what I'll just quickly try to tell you. So we had bought a house with this realtor who was fantastic. And we backed out of the deal because we got cold feet. And she said, "Are you really sure?" And we said, "Yes." So we backed out of that deal and we walked into an open house. My husband at the time, him and I, we bought the house. we it was an open house, we bought it, whatever. I took the deal to the bank and the bank said, "I'm sorry, we can't finance this deal." And I said, "Oh." She said, "Well, what are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, we'll just cancel the deal." And she said, "You can't. This deal is firm." And I said, "What's firm?" I didn't even know what that meant. I didn't
Yeah.
realize I had bought that house without any conditions. And so anyway, long story short, we got financing, we renovated, we did really well on that. But I always remember that. How did this professional realtor, who was quite a bit older than us, let two 22-year-old kids come in, buy a house with no conditions when we had, like, none of that was explained to us. So I'm always really careful about that with people, to make sure that they understand this is what you need. We are professionals. We should be able to hold ourselves to a higher standard and make sure that people understand these things, because it's really important and that will lead to long-term success.
I couldn't agree more. That's exactly, I think, what we both try to do. But I really think it's, relationship management has become a very important thing in any area of business, but particularly where we're dealing with, I'm dealing with realtors. I have some really great relationships with realtors. Um, but also I'm dealing with people that I know they're nervous. It might be their first purchase, even if it's not their first purchase. I mean, it's a big purchase, let's face it. They're nervous, is everything going to be okay? Are we going to get the right information? I think it's really, really important that they feel comfortable that I know what I'm talking about, and I'm giving them the honest, answers without. I'm not sugarcoating, but I'm not also not being like, "Oh my God," like you said, the guy in the attic, right? So that's not something I would ever do, but the honesty part of it is important. I think if you look at any of our company's reviews, like I think I'm coming up on 200 Google reviews, 5-star rating, and I think almost all of us are in the same boat. If you read any of our reviews, there's kind of a common theme. This person really went out of their way to make sure that I fully understood what I was getting into, and we were able to negotiate or where we were able to make a good decision or whatever. Those kind of reviews, they mean a lot to me, and I know they mean a lot to my colleagues as well because it means that we've really done our job well, and they were fully informed and they made the best decision for them.
Especially because buying a house is an emotional thing. People buy with
Yeah,
their heart. I'll buy with their head. Everybody buys with their heart and they justify it with their head. And so you need somebody who is looking out for your best interest. So you're not inspecting this home with your heart. You're inspecting this home with your head. And that's what people need. They need that other side of it to be able to understand what they're buying because it is very important and you want them to move in and love the house. And that's all that we can really ask for. So um,
exactly. Yeah.
I do have another quite interest of time. I'm not going to keep you here all day. So I do have one more question I want to
Yeah,
ask you. Um, because I think in my real estate to me is super important. And I think buying a house is one of the best investments that you can make. I've been able to
I agree.
create wealth through that. I was able to rebuild my life buying real estate and selling real estate, I think is really important. So, but it is scary and it is scary and there are problems that can go wrong. So, knowing all that and doing the inspections and seeing what you've seen, how important do you think it is to buy real estate or should people just run because you could come up with a problem? There could be a problem.
I think that's almost more of like a personal anecdotal answer than to say like as a home inspector because I know for us more than once being a homeowner and having some equity has saved us when a really unexpected situation came up that we were like, what are we gonna do? But the fact was we had some equity to work with, and so yeah, should you be invest in real estate? 100%, I think so. I know it's difficult. It's getting more difficult as the years go by. I mean, I have a 13-year-old daughter. I'm not sure what she's looking at when it comes time to buy a home. I also have 3 adult sons, and I know none of them are homeowners, and I don't know what their plan is exactly, but they've talked about, they really have to think it through. Whereas I think maybe 30 years ago, it was just a different situation. It was kind of like, well, of course, I'm going to buy a house. Now that mindset is not necessarily there. But the investment, real estate is always going to appreciate. I mean, it may have fluctuations, but over time, I think it's still one of the most solid investments. And just from a personal note, like I said, like it's saved us more than once. So I'd say it's really important. And at the end of all of it, when you've paid your mortgage for, decades, you have something real. And if nothing else, it'll certainly help you in retirement, right? So I still think it's very important.
Yeah, and I've seen that. I've seen a lot where people are retiring or much older, or their kids are selling their house, and that money is funding basically
Yeah,
their parents being able to be taken care of. So I think it's really important. I think there are a lot of ways to get. It is harder for people today to get into buying real estate, although there are options, and you
yeah,
know this podcast that we're doing will be on our YouTube channel and we will push it out. And the reason we're doing this is for education. And some of them will be around investments and how do younger kids get into the real estate market. So maybe have your
yeah,
boys watch that one when it comes out. Because there are other ways to get into real estate without everybody thinks you're going to go in and buy your dream house. Well, that's not how I did it. That's probably not how you did it. It's not how the majority of people do it. You get
right.
into the market in some way, shape, or form. And there are a lot of different ways to do that and then kind of work your way up. So, in closing, is there anything that you would like to say to wrap this up about inspections or we will put your contact details in here so people will be able to reach out to you to book inspections or to have questions if they have questions about inspections. We'll put
Great.
all that in there for people. And other than that, is there anything else that you'd like to say in closing here?
I think we've touched on a lot, but I think overall, like it's pretty clear. I mean, I knew before being a home inspector that a home inspection was important when we were looking at buying homes, because the information that you find out, it's that ability to make the most informed decision. you're not necessarily going to walk away. Like I said, every house is going to have some issues. The question is, what kind of issues are they, right? If you're seeing the same kind of, maybe moisture coming in your foundation, but the house was built a year ago versus the 1950. Well, okay, what's going on? I,
Right.
I'm paying a little more attention to that. So it
Yes.
really depends on context. But without that context, people are just thinking, I'm buying a house. All houses are not created equal. I mean, there's so much variation. And if you don't know what you're looking for, understanding the context of the age of the home, understanding the context of, the specific details of what you're looking at and the foundation or the roof or whatever, um, you're really kind of going blind. And it's like you said, it's a big purchase. You want to make the best decision and you want your realtor to get the best deal and things like that. So I think it's a critical part of a home sale.
Agree. I 100% agree. And sellers, I just quickly, because we didn't touch on this, but sellers can also do an inspection before they list their
Yes.
house. They know
I do it a
what
lot.
things, and they can fix, they can fix whatever issues come up.
Yes.
Because nobody wants, let's face it, nobody wants surprises. We don't want surprises as realtors, and buyers and sellers especially don't want surprises when, they think their house is great. And then all of a sudden it's like, your attic is full of mold. Like, no seller wants to hear that. So in most cases, they're not trying to hide that. They don't know it, and they don't know, because most people don't go in their attic. And you're right, it could be as simple as, the exhaust wasn't exhausting properly, or there's, something. And most sellers, nobody wants that. So
Yeah.
I think it's a really good thing to do, especially as buyers. And then you move in, you have this information you can use going forward and know what to look for. So it is really important. So I do appreciate the way you do inspections. I mean, um, Martinez absolutely loves when you do inspections, because he knows he,
I
he
love
just
her.
knows,
It's awesome.
yeah, he knows that you're going to be, you're going to present the facts to the buyer the way the facts need to be presented, and they're not going to walk away wondering anything. They're going to walk away being happy, and that is really important. So
Yeah.
hopefully we'll do this again, a few more times, just to go over different issues. Maybe we'll drill down on different issues, more specifically. I think this was a really good
Agree.
overall general questions that were asked. So yeah, like I said, we'll have your contact details out, and if anyone wants to contact Dean, please feel free to do that. I know the way he works. I know they do great inspections and give really good information. So I highly recommend giving him a call. Whether, if you're thinking of selling and you want to get certain things done, want to make sure that you're not going to have any surprises, that can get done. And as buyers as well, it's a really good option. So I really appreciate you joining me today, Dean.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. And if somebody's looking for me, I do those pre-listing inspections for sellers, just so you're aware. And I also do commercial inspections. So yeah, I'd be happy to talk to anybody that's interested.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a great day.
You too. Cheers.